You can train harder than ever before. You can clean up your diet, cut sugar, reduce calories, and follow every rule you've been told. You can stay disciplined for weeks, sometimes months, and yet your belly still looks the same. Not soft, not loose, but firm, rounded, almost inflated. This is the moment when most people blame themselves. They assume they lack willpower. They assume they're doing something wrong. But the truth is far more unsettling. You're not failing because you're lazy. You're failing because you're fighting the wrong problem. For decades, fat loss has been explained as a simple math equation. Eat less, move more, burn more calories than you consume. And while that equation works for some types of fat, it completely fails when it comes to the most dangerous kinds stored in the human body. The kind that doesn't jiggle, the kind you can't grab, the kind you can't see in the mirror. Most people believe all belly fat is the same. But biologically, that couldn't be further from the truth. There is fat that sits just beneath the skin. It acts like long-term energy storage. It's passive, quiet, mostly harmless. Then there's fat that lives much deeper. This fat surrounds your internal organs. It presses against your liver, wraps around your pancreas, crowds the space where your organs are supposed to function freely. This fat behaves nothing like normal fat. It acts more like an organ than a storage site. It actively releases inflammatory signals. It interferes with hormone regulation. It disrupts blood sugar control. This is visceral fat. And here's what makes it especially dangerous. You don't have to be overweight to have it. Many people who appear thin, athletic, or normal are carrying excessive visceral fat without realizing it. They look healthy on the outside, but internally, their metabolism is under constant stress. This is why some people develop insulin resistance, fatty liver issues, or cardiovascular problems despite never being visibly obese. Visceral fat doesn't announce itself. It doesn't warn you. It quietly accumulates while you assume everything is fine. So how does it develop? Not simply from overeating. Visceral fat thrives in an environment of chronic metabolic imbalance. When your body is under constant stress from poor sleep, emotional pressure, blood sugar spikes, inflammation, or extreme dieting, it adapts in ways that prioritize survival, not aesthetics. At the cellular level, this stress creates damage. Your cells produce unstable molecules known as free radicals. When those free radicals overwhelm your body's defenses, oxidative stress builds up and visceral fat feeds on that environment. It grows faster when inflammation is high. It becomes more active when hormones are It becomes harder to access when your metabolism is under threat. This is why aggressive calorie restriction often makes things worse. When you slash calories too deeply, your body interprets it as danger. It slows energy expenditure. It preserves fat that plays a role in survival signaling, especially visceral fat. Your body isn't broken. It's protecting you. So the solution isn't to push harder. It's to change the signals your body receives. To reduce visceral fat, you have to make your body feel safe enough to let it go. And that requires a very different strategy than traditional dieting. To change those signals, we need to start where visceral fat gets its advantage. Inside your body, visceral fat thrives when there is excess internal damage. Not damage you can feel, but microscopic damage happening inside your cells every day. This damage comes from unstable molecules produced during normal metabolism. They're called free radicals. In small amounts, they're manageable. But when your body is constantly overloaded from poor nutrition, stress, lack of recovery, or blood sugar swings, those free radicals accumulate. This creates a state known as oxidative stress. Think of oxidative stress like rust forming on metal. At first, it's barely noticeable, but over time it weakens structure, disrupts function, and accelerates breakdown. Visceral fat doesn't just survive in this environment. It prefers it. When oxidative stress is high, your body shifts into protection mode. Fat storage increases, inflammation rises, metabolic flexibility decreases. So instead of asking, how do I burn more calories? The better question is, how do I reduce the internal stress that keeps visceral fat alive? This is where nutrition becomes strategic, not restrictive. Your body responds to signals, not just calories. And some of the most powerful signals come from compounds found naturally in plants. specifically pigments. The colors you see in vegetables are not accidental. They are biochemical tools plants use to protect themselves from damage. When you consume those pigments, your body benefits from the same protection. Deep orange, red, and green vegetables contain compounds that help neutralize oxidative stress. They support cellular repair. They calm inflammation. When oxidative stress drops, something important happens. Your body stops feeling threatened. And when your body no longer feels under threat, it becomes willing to release fat stored deep inside the abdomen. This is why color matters more than calorie counting when targeting visceral fat. A plate filled with beige foods, refined grains, crackers, bread provides energy, but very little protection. A plate filled with vibrant colors sends a completely different message. It tells your metabolism that resources are abundant, that damage is being repaired, that survival mode is no longer necessary. But food is only one half of the equation. The other half is what you consume between meals. Certain natural compounds act as metabolic regulators rather than stimulants. One of the most studied sources of these compounds is green tea. Green tea contains a group of polyphenols that influence how your body handles fat. They don't force fat loss. They make fat loss possible. These compounds help increase fat oxidation, the process of converting stored fat into usable energy. They also reduce how much dietary fat your digestive system absorbs. In other words, they work on both ends of the system. But this only works when the source is right. Sugary, bottled teas cancel the effect. Highly diluted teas provide minimal benefit. The most effective form comes from preparations where the entire leaf is consumed, delivering a concentrated dose of these regulatory compounds. There's also an important synergy at play. The natural caffeine present in tea enhances the effect by gently increasing energy demand. Not enough to stress the body, just enough to activate fat metabolism. Together, these compounds create an internal environment that favors fat mobilization instead of fat storage. But even with perfect nutrition, there's one critical piece missing. Movement, and not the kind most people think. When people hear exercise for fat loss, they often imagine extremes. Long-distance running, high-intensity intervals, relentless training schedules. But visceral fat responds best to moderate, sustained demand. Not intensity spikes, not exhaustion. Your body has different fuel systems. Some rely heavily on carbohydrates. Others rely on fat. The trick is activating the system that taps into deep fat stores without triggering stress hormones that shut the process down. This happens at a very specific intensity level. Not too easy, not too hard, and you don't need a heart rate monitor to find it. You can identify it using your breath. If you can talk comfortably without any effort, you're below the threshold. If you're gasping and unable to speak, you've gone too far. The optimal zone is where you can speak in full sentences, but your breathing is clearly elevated. You sound slightly winded. You could keep going, but you're working. This is where your body becomes efficient at accessing visceral fat. And importantly, this zone does not punish your nervous system. It supports consistency, recovery, long-term adaptation. Because visceral fat doesn't disappear overnight. It responds to patterns, not heroic efforts. Now let's bring everything together into something you can actually apply in real life. Because understanding visceral fat is important, but knowing what to do about it is what creates change. The biggest mistake people make at this stage is trying to do everything at once. They overhaul their entire diet. They add intense workouts. They cut calories aggressively. And within weeks, they burn ouchie. The truth is visceral fat responds best to consistent signals, not sudden shocks. Your body is constantly asking one question. Am I safe or am I under threat? Every decision you make sends an answer. When you starve yourself, the answer is threat. When you overtrain, the answer is threat. When you deprive your body of nutrients, the answer is threat. And when your body feels threatened, it holds on to visceral fat. So the goal is not to shock your system. The goal is to convince it. That starts with food, not restriction, but replacement. You don't need to eliminate everything you enjoy. You don't need to count every calorie. You don't need to obsess over macros. Instead, focus on one simple rule. Add color before you subtract calories. Before worrying about what to remove from your plate, ask a different question. Where is the color? At each meal, aim to include at least one deeply colored food. Something green, something orange, something red. This could be spinach, bell peppers, carrots, sweet potatoes, leafy greens. These foods don't just provide vitamins. They actively reduce the internal stress that allows visceral fat to survive. Over time, this shifts your metabolic environment. You're no longer sending a scarcity signal. You're sending a repair signal. Next comes what you drink. Most people underestimate how powerful liquid calories and liquid compounds can be. Instead of adding another stimulant, energy drink, or sugary beverage, create a simple swap. Replace one of your daily drinks with a high-quality green tea. Not sweetened, not bottled, not diluted. Prepared in a way that preserves the natural compounds found in the leaf. This small habit works quietly in the background. You don't feel it immediately. But over weeks, it changes how your body processes fat. It supports oxidation. It reduces unnecessary absorption. It improves metabolic efficiency. And because the stimulation is mild, it doesn't trigger the stress response that blocks fat loss. Now let's talk about movement, the part that scares people unnecessarily. You do not need extreme workouts to reduce visceral fat. In fact, extreme training often works against you. High-stress workouts increase cortisol. Chronically elevated cortisol promotes visceral fat storage. Instead, think of movement as a conversation with your metabolism, not a battle. You want to apply steady, repeatable demand. Aim for sessions that last around 40 to 50 minutes, long enough to tap into fat-based fuel systems, short enough to recover from isolate. Do this 3 to 4 times per week. The activity itself doesn't matter nearly as much as the intensity. Walking uphill, cycling, rowing, swimming, rucking with a backpack. What matters is staying in that moderate zone. Breathing faster, heart rate elevated, able to speak, but sounding slightly winded. This is where your body burns fat efficiently without perceiving danger. And here's something most people don't realize. When it comes to visceral fat, exercise has a dose-response relationship. That means the more consistently you move, the more benefit you receive. Move. There is no hard plateau the way there is with dieting. With dieting, your body adapts by slowing metabolism. With movement, your body adapts by becoming more efficient. This is why exercise is such a powerful tool for reducing deep abdominal fat. Not because it burns calories, but because it restores metabolic flexibility. And this brings us to one final critical principle. Consistency always beats intensity. The best plan is not the one that looks impressive on paper. It's the one you can still follow months from now. If you hate running, don't run. If gyms stress you out, don't go. If structured workouts feel overwhelming, simplify, walk, climb, carry, move. Your body doesn't care how the demand is created. It cares that the demand is consistent and manageable. Over time, these signals add up. Inflammation decreases, insulin sensitivity improves, hormonal balance stabilizes, and slowly, often without dramatic changes on the scale, visceral fat begins to recede. This is why focusing only on body weight is misleading. You can lose very little weight and dramatically improve your health. You can look similar on the outside and be completely different on the inside. The scale doesn't measure inflammation. It doesn't measure organ health. It doesn't measure metabolic resilience. Your body is far more intelligent than a number. When you stop punishing it and start working with it, everything changes. Visceral fat is dangerous, but it is not permanent. Your body wants to heal. It wants balance. It wants stability. And when you give it the right signals, it responds not overnight, not magically, but steadily, reliably, predictably. This isn't about perfection. It's about direction. And when you understand that, fat loss stops being a battle and starts becoming a byproduct of a healthier system. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more evidence-based explanations that actually make sense. And I'll see you in the next one.